Thank you for joining us. It's a really good crowd here, especially on the second day. Thank you, Angie, for inviting us here. Thank you, EnCompass, for pulling this all together. It's really been an outstanding show for us at Arcadian. We're excited to be here. As some of you may know, the Women in Tech Forum and Women in Tech Luncheons, we've had breakfasts. This is an enduring commitment that Arcadian has to improve diversity and inclusion across our industry. I said I think we're sixth event or seventh event. I tend to lose track of these. We've been at this so long, but it is important to be consistent with the message over and over and over because it is such an important message. A little bit about Arcadian and why we have chosen this as a part of our mission. So Arcadian builds the big long-haul backbone routes. You know, this stuff is 300,000 to $1 million a mile. We build 500, 700 miles at a time, $200 to $400 million per route. We're literally, I tell my 12-year-old son, what do you do, Dad? I'm not Al Gore, I actually do build the internet. We build these major data center to data center routes. But once we're in the ground, we disappear and we simply do our thing. This is the second fiber company I've built, and as I was putting this together 6 years ago and coming back out of retirement, as you can see, retirement really didn't stick. It's really, when you think about what we do, I kid around with our folks. I say we dig ditches and put bits of plastic and glass in the ground, which is actually technically accurate. And I put it that way because what it points out is the physical thing we do. It's conduit, it's fiber, it's huts, it's stuff that anybody could buy, right? These are not, kind of patented, things with moats around them competitively. It's how you assemble it, what you do with it. There's a lot of physical assets that we put in the ground. What it really is about relationships. The hardest part about what we do is rights of way. So for example, Salt Lake to Phoenix was one of our first routes, less than 700 miles, 74 different permitting agencies to work through. And if you don't get the 74th permit, you don't have a connectivity. I share that with you to point out it's about the people at Arcadian. There's about 50 of us, there might be 80 or 90 by middle of next year, who are going to put $700 million of assets in the ground. A takeaway from that is the importance of each person. So we're using kind of technology that's been around for a while, a motion of putting fiber in the ground that's been around for a while. It's how we assemble those puzzle pieces that's important. That was the aha moment as I was putting this together. It's about the people. It's about that 50, 70, 80 people and the decisions, more importantly, the decisions those people make. And that really has driven how we recruit, how we retain, how we compensate. We have the best benefits package on the planet, I'm told. But it's because we have a small number of very important people making a small number of very big decisions. When you make decisions, the worst thing in the world is everybody thinks the same way, because then you'll simply continue to do things the same way and sub-optimize. So how do you get different perspectives in the room? Each one of us walks into a room to make a decision and share our voice based on our own experiences, who we are, and indelibly that is affected by how old we are, the color of our skin, what type of upbringing, our gender, sexual orientation. All of those things inform our perspectives. And when you're making a decision, you want differing perspectives to get to the optimum decision. So that's, for me, that's why we have chosen this improving diversity in the industry as something we put front and center as a part of what Arcadian does. It can seem like it's kind of a strange thing, we build big backbone, but again, it's because it's a small number of people making very big, important decisions, hundreds of millions, if not billions of dollars, decisions by a small number of people, and you want to avoid groupthink, you want diversity, so you have to select people that bring very different perspectives in the room. I've been in this industry about 30 years, it's starting to show, thinning graying hair. But as I look around these conferences, and this is where I'll throw kind of rocks at my own glass house, if you look at the leadership, I mean, we're all middle-aged white males. It just is what it is. And I speak freely about this because I think this is a time when people that look like me in my age group are going to retire, and we're going to stay retired this time. This is a time, folks, in the next 5 years, I believe, when a lot of us are going to retire and stay retired. This is the time to really start to try to push that next generation of leaders, build the next generation of leaders over the next 5 years who bring more diverse thoughts. It's not necessarily the color of your skin or your gender is different. That impacts your perspective, and that makes for better decisions when you're sitting in a room with people not like you. That is why this is important to me. I love this industry. I've been in it 3 decades, hopefully not another 3 decades, we'll see. As you know, telecom is kind of like a virus. Once you're bit, there really is no cure for it, from what I can tell. But we've taken this voice very, very purposefully to try to move the needle on making better decisions as we're starting to attack enormous industry issues, gigawatt data centers, like as we're all chasing power for the next data center. We certainly don't want to find our point where do we build the next data center or the next set of suburban homes. If we're not careful, we may end up there. So there's a number of decisions as an industry we're facing that we need to make really optimized decisions, which means we need the best possible decision makers in the lead. That's why this is important to us. It's about different perspectives to make better decisions, to move us in a new direction and tackle the next set of things in front of us, get through the next set of brick walls with this industry. Always finds a way to either go through, over, under, or around. We always do. So with that, let me welcome Angie and the panel back to the stage. We have an amazing panel this time. We have Sarah, who's actually a former Arcadian from the very early days of Arcadian's formation. Mignon, who's joining us back as a panelist from the past. Jennifer from Verizon. Verizon has been one of Arcadian's partners in raising the voice of this issue. So with that, ladies, welcome. Angie, take it away.
Everybody at the table know this is going to be an interactive discussion. I heard Dan emphasizing having the different perspectives in a room for optimum decision making is key for the success of this industry. So we're going to hear from our esteemed panelists, but we also want to hear from you. So in the middle of your table, you should see lots of pens that look like this and some note cards. So someone at the table, pass them around. This is required participation, okay? All right. And while you're doing that, then we'll go through and let each of the panelists introduce themselves. So we'll start with Jennifer. So you just tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do now, and your background.
Perfect. Thanks, Angie, and thanks everybody for being here. I love the mix of people here as we go on this journey of gender equity in the industry. I think everything Dan said was correct. So I'm thrilled to see a mix of men and women, so thank you all for being here. I'm Jennifer Parkhill. I'm the Senior Director of Strategy, Execution, and Program Management for Verizon Partner Solutions. So we're the global wholesale business unit of Verizon. We have a lot of team here. I think we've met with 80 customers, so thrilled to have the engagement that Encompass provides from a business perspective as well as forums like this. I've been in the industry probably 2 decades. I took a break in there to have children and stay home with them, which has been part of my journey that I always talk about, coming back into the workforce and how do you basically start at ground zero and work your way back up and learn the technology, make sure you're providing opportunities for others. I had, from a technical perspective, the opportunity to come into Verizon and do the MEF certification, which for me at the time was a technical challenge. Surpassed it, obviously, and I think it's given a great foundation as we think about what we need to give the skills for the future generations. Understanding that technology really is key. So that's one of my call to action that I think about as I have panels like this. What do we want to have future generations do? Really make sure you're grounded in what the technology is to deliver the services that our customers require.
Great.
So this is going to be a bad joke, and so I used to be Mignon Clyburn, and I say that to say it's something I got from somebody else in the telecom. I was a former commissioner twice. at the South Carolina Public Service Commission and at the Federal Communications Commission. I did about 6 or 8 months of fellowship with Open Society Foundations, and then I started up MLC Strategies. Full disclosure, one of my clients is EnCompass, so I'll behave for a minute or two, and then you will see, you know, who I really am. But no, seriously, this should be interactive. I want us to be as candid as we're comfortable being. One of the things I will anticipate being asked is, how do you handle it and how do you balance it all? You're not going to get the definitive answer here, and that's a good thing. You will get candor from me for sure. You might not, you know, you work for government. I got rid of
I can't be so candid.
Yeah. But one of the things I heard on a radio show, and I got the name here, there is a Dr. Allison Fregel, if I'm saying her name right, at the University of North Carolina. I caught her on the way to Dulles, coming here, on a Hidden Brain science podcast, for those, who listens to Hidden Brain. And she is the author of a book called Likeable Bad you know, I'm not going to use it, but Likeable Bad, you know what. And the one thing she said, Angie, if you will indulge me, she's going to do it anyway. She said this in a writing: although it feels like women face a million sources of disadvantage relative to men, they only face 2, a lack of power and a lack of status. Power is a control over our resources, but status, she says, is the way others see you. So thinking that power comes from the first, then status second, she said, is against the law of nature. Power is awarded based on status, and the path to status, she suggests, is being a likable bad, I'm really not going to say it today, being assertive and warm, showing conviction and blending it with the ability to care about others. That, along with looking for things in common with others when we brag, give yourself the freedom to add humor to that. All of these, she says, the mix of all of these things puts all of us in a more advantageous place. I just wanted, just in case I didn't have time at the end, I just wanted to leave that with you. It is a mix. It is an incredibly, sometimes difficult journey, but it's one worth taking. So thank you for having me.
Great, thank you, Mignon. All right, Sarah.
I was not nearly as thoughtful in preparing for this. That was really, I think that we should all think about that quite a bit. Thank you. My name's Sarah. I totally did not come into this place working for NTIA in a normal way. I worked on the assembly line at Ford. I built the Ford Taurus. And then I decided that I wanted to get my MBA, so I did that. And I'm so old that the Chicago Bulls were winning championships. Wow. And I was trying to steal somebody's table at a bar, and I found out she worked at MFS, and I'm like, I want to work at MFS. And that was how I got into telecom. And so since then, here I am working for the government. I live here in Denver. Never would have dreamed in a million years that I would be working for the federal government, and I don't think I've ever been happier in my whole life. And I think the greatest reason that I am so happy is that I work with just a tremendous amount of people who are driven by this mission, and the mission is to make life equitable for all Americans, and we're going to do that.
That's great. All right, so today we're going to identify the challenges and opportunities that we have, how women can gain the technical experience they need to succeed in this industry, how we can influence future trends in the industry, including the innovations that are taking place today in our companies and around us. As we were preparing, we talked about 3 kind of key themes that we wanted our panelists to hit: leadership, growth and opportunity, future trends, and innovation. Okay, so are you ready? Everybody have their note card and their pens? You ready to go? I want you to think of one word that describes yourself and write that down on the note card. Okay? All right, while they're doing that assignment, let's start with leadership. What advice would you give to women in our industry who aspire to become leaders in the industry? So, Jennifer, let's start with you.
Sure. I will pick up on some of the themes I think you've already heard from the three of us. I like the story you told, Mignon, with the status and power. I think a lot of that has to come, though, from self-actualization, and also back to my point on education. You have to be known as an expert on something, and I think, again, grounding yourself in the technology, having strong financial acumen, so understanding how do you read results, how do you then come up with new initiatives to drive performance. At least in my space, it might be different based on each of our experiences, but when you're running a business and you're trying to deliver the P&L results that you're being held accountable for, it's really important, I think, that you understand what you're talking about. I think the human side of it is also very important, so having the skills to making sure you're warm, making sure people understand you have empathy. I think for a lot of us, making sure we know how to give a pathway and opportunities for those coming behind us. So I'm big on visibility, providing opportunities on all hands calls across our business unit to make sure when we see talent and we want to give them a chance to show who they are, whatever the topic may be, we prep them, we make sure everybody's set up for success, and put them in front of groups of people. And I think building that confidence is something that we can all own and do, and that's an important part of leadership as we go forward.
Okay. Mignon, Sarah, do you want to add anything to that?
I think when I think about leadership, something that struck me as I prepared for this is, for myself at least, I think a lot about being an indirect leader, and I think about serving. And I say that because, like, I'm not political. I don't aspire to become CEO of any place. I don't aspire for titles or anything like that. I just want to do a great job every single day with something that I love. And I think that like, I'm still tickled to be invited to speak on a panel like this with these women, because I don't consider myself a leader. I get to do something that I love, and I get to work with people who I love, and I serve the people that I love. So those are my thoughts.
Well, I guess to reemphasize, know your business, but also know your value and your worth. Stay current, all of those core values that you hear, but know that these paths can be a little choppy and rocky. But you're built for this. You really are. I'm not saying that to take everything. That's not what I'm saying. But you are built for this. It is not going to be that straight, narrow road. It's going to wind. You're going to stub your toe. You're going to skin your knees. All of those things are going to happen, whether you earned it or deserve it or not. So know, and I've said this politically, and some of you will know what I'm talking about. What the path that many of us are taking are paths that haven't been plotted and charted by people who look like us before. So respectfully, this is not a hall pass, what I'm about to say. It takes some getting used to for those who are not used to it. And so it is give and take. It is you recognizing that, but it's you, not shrinking back from that, but knowing that, you've got some people in your core that might not be used to this. Angie's giving me a high sign, and I'm too verbal.
But I just think it's interesting, the segue between you two. You're like making a point that she just made in terms of how she feels about herself.
Right.
And you're like, you may not consider yourself a leader, but you are, like, look at what you're doing. I think it's being an indirect leader.
Yes, right? it is. And I always say titles don't matter. It might matter paycheck-wise, so let me back up a little bit. But it really doesn't, because, you can be that leader and, be in the janitorial pool, with all due respect. And so that part of it is not as important to getting to your goal, the title, as who and what you are, and what you project, and who you bring alongside with you. And so, to me, you're right, titles matter less, but who you are and what you mean for others. is boundless. That matters.
Well, and if I can add to that, I think that's where I'd love to bring the men into the conversation too, because I think as a female, I very much resonate with that advice and counsel. And I think Dan was right. In the next 5 years, we're sort of at this momentous point in the industry where we need to be bringing other people along with us and providing the opportunities and validating who people are and giving that pipeline. And I think, you know, as part of this panel, having that call to action to everybody in the room. You know, obviously for the females in the space, which, you know, we've all talked about this significantly, at least in my tenure, of like, how do we put ourselves forward, own who we are, make sure we're putting our best opportunity in front of us, but also for the men to be aware of it. I think the level of consciousness of this is much higher than it's ever been, at least in my career. And I think making sure everybody feels empowered to make that difference in your organization, regardless of your gender and your title and your role. We all have a part to play to be allies, advocates, mentors, sponsors. And I think that's the part that I would, you know, tag on to sort of this 3-part series you have with us, the 3 of us, each with our own experiences of how do you make this better then for the next step going forward.
And Angie, thank you for letting me have a third bite at the apple. You notice how I did that? I think if there's a challenge for me, excuse me, I know if there's a challenge today for me for men in leadership, it is not to get so hung up on the how, but the what. The what is the goal. How it is executed, as long as it fits into the framework of your organization. Be careful of that. Be mindful of that, and allow that differentiation or that different approach to be part of the positive narrative when you evaluate. I'm saying all that to say this. People have a tendency to want things done in the way in which they would do them. That is not always the case when it's not you. It's not always the case when the person is of a different background or gender from you. But does it get done? And sometimes I have noticed that when it comes to the evaluation part, which of course leads to the compensation side of the coin, that maybe that is not best reflected. So my charge to you is, if it is getting done, even if it's not how you do it, reward that. That is how you retain, is how you support, and that is how you enable.
Okay, so now I want you to look at your card. How many of you have a word on your card that reflects what we've heard from our panelists? You're an expert. You have strong financial acumen. You have empathy. You recognize the human side. And you feel empowered. Raise your hand if you have a word that's along those lines.
I think that's awesome.
I think it's really great. Okay, now who might be willing to share that word with us and talk about your experience? Anyone? I want you to feel empowered right now to share your experience.
Or you will get drafted.
And I'm about to draft Taylor because Taylor had lifted her hand and she's got the microphone. All right, Taylor, share your word and give us why you chose that word in your experience.
I wrote down caring. And what was the second question?
That was, and tell us why you wrote down caring.
I wrote down caring, but then I also thought positive, because I always try to be, like, bring positivity to any situation and make others feel empowered or able to be their authentic selves. And I know that, like, that Angie, you're a great boss, and you always encourage me to go into any situation with my personality, which can be quite silly or positive or just have like a lot of energy, and that doesn't happen in a lot of legal spaces with a lot of attorneys. So that's something that I have learned from the women in telecom that I've worked with so far, is that you can come in with your own personalities and experiences and you bring something new to the table that might not happen in other industries.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I'm just going to give a little background about Taylor. Taylor just graduated from law school, and she is my newest employee on the policy team. Thank you. And we met, she went to the same law school that both Chris Shipley and I went to, but we met through our very close alumni association, and she interned for us a year ago, so right before her last year in law school, and she's doing excellent work just diving in to represent our members' interests. And thank you for sharing. And that describes you perfectly. I just think it's amazing that you're so new in your career and you really know yourself already. Any reactions from the panelists?
Lawyers can have fun?
Yeah.
Question mark?
We do have fun.
I'm not an attorney. I haven't noticed that really, but anyway. No, I mean, you know, workplace, it doesn't have to be stale. It really doesn't, you know, to get things done. You know, because I am, you know, Angie will tell you, I was not that boss. I could be silly, I could be, you know, quirky, I could be a little sharp. You know, all of those things, you know, describe it, but we got the work done. And when things were tough, she'll tell you too, and this is a line I used, guilty or innocent as charged, there's only one diva in the office. She'll tell you I said it.
And only one person's name on the door.
Yeah, well, yeah, I said that too. But I mean, sometimes you have to have those resets, you know, when things are, you know, get, you know, a little mixed up. And so, you know, things worked. We still talk. You know, it's not an employee that I don't have a, you
15 years.
Yeah, and so it does not have to be the standard, you know, whatever societal template that we've embraced. It doesn't have to be that way to get things done, and we got things done.
I would say, so this morning on a completely different topic, a friend texted me, and the beginning of her text was, "I'm a woman in IT, it's awkward." And I thought, and so kind of along the lines of having fun and caring is, I think, for me, at least, having fun, being awkward is, to me, the most fun in the whole wide world. Like, I'll always try to be respectful, of course. But sometimes tough questions need to be asked, and somebody's, excuse me, got to have the balls to ask. And I am going to be that person, and anybody else who has the courage or the conviction to ask that kind of a question, I will back that person up. And for me, that's what makes work fun, is actually not holding myself back because I'm afraid, because I did that for way too long. And thank goodness you're like graduated from college and you already know this. So kudos to you. It took me too long.
And I'm glad you brought that up because, again, when I said not having a straight line, another thing about that book she talks about, and I thought it was interesting with being a woman of a certain age, with an AARP card for like 15 years or whatever, is the fact that she mentioned, and this was more from a college professor point of view, but it is applicable, that at different phases you are perceived differently and have different levels of effectiveness. Like at Taylor's age, you know, everybody's like, oh wow, you know, if she were teaching in a class, she's the most effective. When you get to kind of like 10 years ago and up to my age, it's been a while, then you're perceived as less effective. It is because, her conclusion, that we take on some of the traits of that bad A, but not some of the others with the empathy, and you know, so we haven't necessarily calibrated to the point of those around us thinking that we are embracing and wonderful and effective. They see that we get the work done, so we got that that A part done, if you forgive that. But the bad, that is good part, we need to continue to work on. So it's very interesting that as we age, you know, how we're perceived, and that, you know, that you have to continually check and balance yourself to ensure that that calibration is one in which you want to project so you can get the rewards, again, at any age.
So one of the things that I was focused on the last several months with someone who's a professional and helping, you know, men and women think through the next steps in their careers she had me go through like several different questions where I was answering, what I do. And I had a lot of action words. I do this, I do that. And she had me think about, but to do all of those things, you have to have leadership skills. So you need to take those action words and action sentences and describe them as leadership skills, right? And it was a really important process, and I'm 30 years into my career, right, to think about it in a different way than how I've always thought about, well, I'm the doer. I'm so much more than just a doer. Right. And so I really encourage all of you to think about your role that you're playing in your company. How many of the skills that you're using every day really are leadership skills? Then look at your resume. Are you emphasizing those leadership skills in your resume and for the next job that you're applying for? Because if you're not, you should be. That is really, really important for each and every one of us. Okay, so before we move on, I think empowerment. So, how important is it to have a strong network of women in tech for your growth and empowerment, and then how have you built that?
So I'll start, I guess.
Yeah,
please. I think we've seen this documented in lots of studies. I know Girls Who Code, which is an organization probably most of us have touched at some point, 47% of young females who have a mentor through the programs see more success in elevating their roles and responsibilities in organizations. So I think it's definitely an important part of that growth and empowerment. I think I always get tactically back to your point about being doers, but I think, just going from the what to the how, regardless of the topic, I think you need to provide people tools. And, we were talking before the panel of like, how do we cross-pollinate more and better so that we can have best practices sharing? Because I think all of us have probably done different things in our organizations that the rest of us could pick up and leverage in our own. And I think that's something I continue to glean every time I have the opportunity to meet with people of what can we be doing better and differently to have that growth with the talent as we bring them up through. And I think, again, providing training opportunities. I know in Verizon we spend a lot of time with learning and development. I have one of my colleagues over here who's filming right now, who actually is one of the ringleaders doing our technology training for all of the employees. And it's been a huge benefit because we make sure our employees stay current. And that, again, as I started with, having that technical background to start as your foundation, and then feeling empowered because you know your stuff and you're able to present it. And I think the other skill that I would put in there is the ability to communicate. If you can put your thoughts into a concise manner so that most people understand what the value is, I think that's going to also take you a long way. And I think providing people that empowerment, that they practice communication, because it doesn't come naturally to all of us. And I think earlier, one of you said it, of like, how do you put yourself forward in a way that doesn't come across arrogantly, but confidently? And I think that's a nuance that for many of us take a lot of years to hone. And I think that would be one of my suggestions under the empowerment of how do we then help empower others by giving them that opportunity to do it.
So I'll be succinct. I know y'all don't believe this. There was a televangelist that I saw once, and I wish I could get the voice, but this is going to be just as silly. If you can see it, you can be it. And that sums it up for me. I mean, really. That wasn't a good televangelist voice. But those types of affirmations, those types of visible examples are just, just so credible and so needed. I can't tell you how many people have walked up and like, oh my gosh, I didn't think I could, especially if you go to schools and, no matter, institutions of higher learning too. People need to see that whatever their background or insecurity or whatever they think they don't have is not a barrier to the next series of steps in these industries. Yes, you need to know what you do, all of these other things. And yes, it is a plus if you can take the technical and distill it to the point where the technician understands it as well as the person that needs, the other person who's not technical needs to be. And so that is an important skill that will differentiate you from the wonderful eggheads that are in our lives. And I mean that lovingly. kind of, sort of.
So Sarah, how about your network? How have you been able to navigate and build a network of women around you?
Well, I've always been in some part of women in tech, wherever I've worked, and that was primarily like building a safe environment, building a safe place, and it wasn't just like throw mud on the walls of men or anything like that. It was more just building a safe place, because I've worked in places that were 99% type A, which included me. I worked in places that were 99% engineers, which was not me, and I work with 99% lawyers, which is not me. Sometimes you just need a safe place to be, and that's what I get the most from having a network. Either you call women in tech, or you just like regularly meet with women that you talk to and confide in, because we all need that. The other thing that I'll say that means very much to me is just being a human being. Like, for example, I have a friend who I used to work with, and she's at a very high level at a very large ISP. And when we worked together, I think I might cry, but she was fired one day. This woman came from one of the best business schools that any of us could dream of attending. She was smarter. She worked harder. She had children, and she just killed herself for this company. And just out of the blue, one day, they said she was gone. And she was so shocked and so devastated. It came from nowhere. I knew where she lived. We weren't even very close. And one day I just brought like a half dozen cupcakes and delivered them to her house. And her daughter, who was like maybe 6, answered the door, because this woman was still so hurt. She couldn't even talk to anybody. And to this day, like, I don't even know if she ate them, and I don't care. And I don't think that she thinks I'm her best friend in the whole wide world, but we still, to this day, I think of her as, we have that bond as two human beings. And I think that that's what I look for in this world, is those kinds of relationships where I know when I get fired from someplace, she's going to be the one bringing me cupcakes. That's what I look for in life more than anything.
I think I am glad you put that forth. I was at a conference a couple of weeks ago, and a prominent CEO that looks like me, so you'll probably figure out who she is, got dismissed, real public. And she talked about it. I'm not allowed to say, but she talked about it. And I wondered how many people, she hinted at it, sort of reached out to her in that moment. I don't just want to hear from you when I get a promotion. It is therapeutic to hear from you when things don't go especially well. That's important for you and for the person who is going through that change. That's the empathy, because at any given moment, unless you write your own paychecks, and I'm here to tell you as a person who writes their own paychecks, that's not a guarantee either. It could be you. And so I'm not trying to scare anybody. It's just a reaffirmation that no matter what, there are a lot of things outside of our control, but the way we react to something and what we do when someone is in need of a how you're doing, thanks for the calories, whatever the reinforcement, that is important. That's one of the greatest gifts you can give to someone. And it's one of the greatest gifts when you give someone that you will get back without you thinking about it in real time. Yeah. So I'm glad you shared that story.
Okay, so how many of you put on your cards a word like a mentor, a builder? You're helping to build not just actual physical networks, but human networks. How many of you put empathy? Yes, Jade, you know I'm going to call on you now. Especially in your beautiful pink suit. So share with us how your word reinforces what we're hearing from the panelists about building our network of women around us.
Yeah, so my word is connector. And I'm just really passionate about bringing people together and making everybody feel included and finding ways to support others by, you know, putting them in contact with somebody I may know that they might not, and that has come back to me tenfold. And Sarah and Mignon and Angie, you all three were there for me when I had a similar situation, and I think that's because you know how much I care, and I cheerlead others, and so people are always there to cheerlead me, and I couldn't be in this industry without the supportive network I have. And I just do want to give Angie a shout out because anytime I need counsel, I call her, and she's way too busy, and she still picks up the phone and gives me counsel. And so I just really appreciate the women in this industry and the fact that you're doing this lunch.
Thank you, Jay.
Very therapeutic.
And we can start by following each other on LinkedIn before we leave the room.
Yeah, please do.
Why don't we do that?
And some folks in this room are really prolific LinkedIn posters, right? And I love to see the different conferences people are going, whether or not they've been recognized for the work that they're doing. I mean, it is okay to give yourself a shout out when you're doing great things.
You should. You should be giving yourself a shout out every single day.
Exactly. Okay, so now I want you to raise your hand if you feel like this is an area that you need more support on. You need more people around you to support you in your efforts and in your career. And I'm asking you to be very vulnerable right now, but I want you to recognize where you are right now.
Well, and I'll put my hand up, honestly, I think, and I would say across the room, right? I think, you know, we all, it's an evolution, and none of us are at the end of our journey. And I think whether it's support amongst the people here in the room, obviously offline, to your point, connecting on LinkedIn, I know I'm a big advocate of like reach out and, you know, I'll do whatever I can. Connecting people to different people, providing resources, because some of us have had the opportunity to be at different events recently, and it's a common theme across the globe, quite honestly. I was in London last week on a similar panel, and it doesn't matter what geography you're in, there's still a journey to be had. And I think if we can all come together, and, you know, Angie, I'm going to look at you since you're hosting us, but don't mean to put the responsibility all on you, but like, how do we bring this together as far as like from this event to the next event, you know, creating some sort of collaborative, whether it's every other month or something where we can all come together, whoever's interested, virtually, in person, maybe based on geography, of doing something where we can all take that next step of saying and owning, yes, I know I need more support, whatever that might be in. Potentially.
I love that idea. Okay, so raise your hand if you want to join Encompass and these women to get together on occasion to touch base. Oh my gosh, I love this.
Yeah.
Right? Okay, so this is awesome. So what I want you to do, actually, Josie, did we scan everybody in? We did. Yes. Okay, so if you want to opt out of getting an email to like join us for a Zoom event,
and let the FCC know that you have an opt-out option.
But otherwise, you're going to be getting an email from us where we can all get together and we can share. And I'll work with one of my staffers, Caroline. I'm really known for hiring women. So I have Caroline on my staff, Lindsay on my staff, Taylor on my staff. You know, we'll commit to all of you that we want to follow through and keep the conversation going. All right, future trends and innovation. Are y'all ready? Moving on to the next topic. So what emerging technologies are you most excited about? And how do you see women and the women in this room contributing to those developments? So I'm going to start down here. How about you, Sarah?
Well, I consider myself more of a Luddite than a tech visionary, but I've been listening to a lot of podcasts, and there's one in particular that I like where they tend to interview a lot of coders and developers. I don't know how to code or develop, but I think it's very it's fascinating to me to hear about the frontiers of this artificial intelligence kind of world, and so what we can do with that. And I also think, maybe this is the wrong term, but I also think quite a bit about open source, and like when we were talking earlier about permitting, how can we be a little more kumbaya with, if it's with artificial intelligence or because it's open sourced or whatever it is, how do we how do we use these technologies that already exist and just make the world a better place, the applications? How do we commoditize these products? And it's the service that makes everything better. And that's, I know that women are certainly capable of being amazing coders and developers, and I think that personally, then this is my own bias because this is how I am, I think that the value that I add is kind of like Jade being the connector, or, you know, being the person. I think that women make it more human, make it more real. Like, it was really sad, this podcast I was listening to, and these younger men were talking about, you know, predictive texting and how, like, this is like, you know, when your best friend is going to finish your sentence for you, but it's like your computer. And I'm like, that's sad, you know? And so, like, what if like the spin, the value that women tend to bring, because we are, and I know that that's just my own bias, but that's what I think about, is women putting their spin of being these fantastic, connecting, collaborative, empathetic people who are going to make technology better for the world.
So I'm still excited about all the trends that you know. I wrote a list. I wrote about it. 5G and beyond, AI, you know, machine learning, especially when it comes under AI. I'm thinking about ethics, fairness, you know, experiences and research, and how our uniqueness you know, plays a prominent and essential role in this. Augmented and virtual reality. I remember going to AARP. What is this AARP thing? I'm stuck in AARPville. But I went to their resource or computer or technology lab, and I saw this person from Israel and this company where they were making a difference when it comes to PT, you know, physical training, and they were using, you know, the cartoonists, you know, these, you know, again, augmented interactions. Thank you. You know, to help you with the movements you would make in the boring PT. Now it's more exciting because you're relating, but you're doing all of those things. Those things are incredible, and who better than women that know, you know, again, our cycles and our evolutions, you know, physically and otherwise, and psychologically, to be honest, you know, to come up, you know, with these concepts. And I couldn't leave here without talking about AI when it comes to national security. You know, that is of interest to all of us, but it is a place where it's scary and opportunistic. And lastly, I'll say green tech, you know, coming from, you know, a place where there have been environmental tragedies. To be honest with you, how do we restore? You know, how do we redesign? You know, how do we do these types of things that will, again, give a sort of a rebirth to communities that have been left behind or have been, honestly, brown fields and the like. So these are the things that I'm excited about, and how our industry can help make things better.
Great. Yeah, I would agree with all of that. I think the sustainability component is key for our industry. You know, I think the access to all that, Sarah, that you're working on is so incredibly important for all elements of our society to have the opportunity to be educated and contribute. And I think, you know, I have 2 sons and a daughter, and, you know, my sons too, I don't want them to be the young males who are, you know, left behind either. I think together we're better. And I think bringing in the skill sets of everybody and the opportunities together is going to just elevate and raise the lake across the ecosystem. And, you know, whether it's the AI trends, and I always think there's a human element of the decision making that will always be there. So I'm not afraid of Gen AI and what it's doing. I think there's always a human piece. We will always be needed to make the decisions with whatever that data is, and I think that's an exciting part. I'm thrilled. I love having the opportunity for having young people have exposure to all the different things we all do, everything you all do, and I think having internship programs, like it sounds like Angie, obviously you do, obviously a lot of our companies do. I think then reinvesting is where we can then harness the youth of the society, get them in the industry, and that, you know, they're going to make it a better place. They're an amazing young generation, and I hope we set the world right for them so they can make the difference that I think they're equipped to be.
So I promised you I would be a little more provocative. One thing that I'm interested in is what they call conscious capitalism. You know, B Corps, benefit corps, where you can, measure or calibrate that profit with purpose, or these social innovation hubs that I think are needed. Those are the types of things that I am hopeful in my next phase of this journey. Looking at, how in an innovative way we can make positive social impact. That's going to improve all of us. That's going to make your businesses more robust. Again, if we have these communities that are, better educated, more stable, and again, environmentally healthy.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for sharing. Okay, we have 3 minutes left. And I do want to open it up for any questions from the audience at this time. Right here. Taylor, do you have the microphone still? Right here, red jacket.
Hi, so you guys talked about like your books and podcasts that you guys follow or read. Do you have any other resources that you would like to share with us that we can listen to or read on our own to help improve the skills we have?
That's a really great question. Do you have any advice on that?
I think there's a lot. I mean, if you go out to LinkedIn, the Empowered Network is a global-based organization. They have a ton of reading and links. Obviously, the one you mentioned earlier, Mignon, I think is good. There's books like Unapologetically Ambitious by Shelley Archambault. She's amazing. She happens to be a Verizon board member, so I don't mean to inadvertently plug that, but her story is an amazing one, and she articulates it very well. There are a ton of resources, and maybe, again, if you're going to send an email out, we can send a link or send a list through that.
I think that's great, and as part of my process, I actually took a leadership test. Off the top of the head, I'm not thinking of the brand, and it's fairly inexpensive, but just, I was amazed at how it pegged me exactly. How I would have described myself. So it gave me, my leadership skills, my top ones, and then the ones that I could work on, and advice, on how to hone in on that. So I want to include that in the list as well. So,
and there are a lot of professors, as I hinted, with the professor at the University of North Carolina, that are doing some incredible research and getting that information out that would be beneficial no matter where you are in your career.
I'm also a big fan, again, going back to being a Luddite, of actually talking to people. And so I kind of challenge all of us in this room, if we all have each other's email addresses, what if we set a target to once a month, reach out and learn something from somebody in this room, somebody new every single time. I think that's how we add diversity. I think we get very stuck in our own bubbles and our own neighborhoods and our own. We hire who we know, we train who we know, we're friends with who we know, and then here we are all looking alike and homogenous in one place. And if we want to drive diversity and inclusion, it's stepping outside of that and talking to people outside of who we would normally So if you want to talk to Crazy Sarah, I pick up my phone all the time. I would gladly welcome a conversation. Not that I'm going to have wise words, but just to learn another perspective.
It has to be intentional. It's not going to be organic. And when we continue on this path, it is not going to be easy. It's going to be a little messy, just like democracy, as we're seeing right now. But it is worth the journey. I go back to what I am saying. It's not going to be easy. It shouldn't be easy. Guess what? You don't want easy. Why? You don't learn from easy. You don't. And so it really is important, for us to take that leap. However you vent, go ahead and, curse or drink or whatever you do, not around me. And then get up the next day and do it again. It is important for your growth and the growth of your companies.
Yeah, I love that idea, and we are out of time. So I know I made a commitment to you all, and we will do the follow-up. I want to thank Arcadian for sponsoring this session. I thought that the words that Dan gave us to start us out were really impactful. We did hear a lot of diversity in the conversation, but we also heard a lot of commonality, too, of our experiences. And he, too, has promoted women. He's got great women on his staff. Josie's sitting right next to him, and I assume Cindy's in the room. The lights are really bright. I think it's important for us to stay connected, so really want to see that happen. Thank you for sharing your experiences. your vulnerabilities, because we did see that today. And we are all human, and you really provide us such a great example of a whole person that isn't just a worker bee. That you provide leadership, you've empowered us to grow, and you're helping us to think about the future and the innovations and how we can contribute. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Let's give them a round of applause.